Hello, I am Furion and I am your host, and today I'd like to present to you another report from ETC 2014. It is game number 3, where I played versus Christian Wenberg from Sweden. Sweden was the winner of ETC 2014 and my opponent was playing Vampire Counts. Let's go straight to the roster. So he had a Vampire Blenderlord, a Vampire Battlestar Bearer, some Necromancer to fill his level death allowance, double the Tom Banshee, a third Shriek in form of Mortis Engine, a fourth Shriek in form of Terrorgeist, 55 Skeletons with Banner of Swiftness and 8 Crypt Horrors to tank some damage, and his Redirectors composed of 3x5 Direwolves and 2 Fellbats. The contents of my roster is also available on the screen, and if you would like to learn more on how this roster works, there is a clickable link on the bottom of the screen. So if you watch this battle report series for the first time or you don't remember my roster, feel free to click it. It will pause this video and open a new tab. Before going into detail on how this specific battle unfolded, I'd like to start with some general remarks on how any game versus Vampire Counts should look like in theory. Vampire Counts is one of the few armies in Warhammer which lacks musicians on its key units, and those units also have quite a big footprint. The consequence of that the deployment of the Vampire Counts has to be specifically tailored depending on what is your opponent playing. If you are the Vampire Counts player and your opponent has quite a mobile army, then the correct play would be to deploy near one of the table edges. This way, one of your flanks is defended by the table edge, and this is how you compensate the lack of musicians. So you give away a big chunk of board control in favor of having one of your flanks protected. I am quite positive that if you are a Vampire Counts player and you deploy in the center of the table against a mobile army, you will get outflanked really quickly, and because you don't have musicians, you will have to take a flank charge here or there, and you will ultimately lose the game. If you are a Vampire Counts player and you are playing against army which is not that mobile, then the point in which you center your deployment is not that important because the opponent won't be able to flank you anyway. So the lack of musicians doesn't factor very much when determining the outcome of the game. Now, some general advice when you fight against the Vampire Counts. As you might imagine, the fact that the Vampire Counts don't have any musicians works to your advantage, and you have to exploit it as much as possible. So try to have a wide angle of attack. If you have 2 hard hitting units, try to split them, one on each side, and hopefully you'll manage to force your opponent to take a charge in the flank. When fighting against Vampire Counts which have 2 or more screams, act with extreme caution when choosing your fights, because the worst thing that can happen to you is to be stuck in a unit of zombies and get screamed at for the rest of the battle. So if you decide to go into close combat, make sure that you are able to kill this unit in a predefined time frame. So that's it for general advice on how should a Vampire Counts battle pan out. Now let's go into the specific battle that I played at ETC 2014. Now you can see the deployment on the screen. On top side, from left to right, we can see a Bolt Thrower, 6 Silver Helms with a Champion, anointed on flames by a Phoenix, the Cavalry block and the Bolt Thrower behind them, an Eagle, a Bolt Thrower, a Phoenix, and 6 Silver Helms. The Vampire Counts from left to right consist of 20 zombies, a Terrorgeist in a corner, 5 Direwolves, a big block of almost 60 skeletons with all the characters inside. Next to them are the Crypt Horrors, and behind them is the Mortis Engine. Then we see 20 zombies and 2 units of Direwolves to close the flank. Judging from his deployment, I think it is safe to say that my opponent anticipated to get outmaneuvered in the middle of the board. So, as I mentioned before, he decided to use one of the board edges as his additional protection. Furthermore, he reinforced the table edge with the Terrorgeist, so any attempt to attack this force from the left side of the table would be a complete disaster. After deploying, we shake hands and roll for the first turn, and unfortunately I win the roll. Winning the roll for the first turn against a Scream-based vampire count isn't actually anything good. Because, assuming my opponent wins this roll, what are his options? He can only move himself away from the table edge, or away from the side table edge, and it's not really beneficial in any way. It is much more better to end the game when you are fighting against a vampire count. But anyway, I started and these are my first turn moves. All of my army advances, but it is a very well organized position that I set up. First, let's check the distances. The distance from the Terrorgeist is over 29 inches to my nearest unit. The reason why it is 29 inches, because Terrorgeist Scream has a range of 8 inches, he can fly 20, so that's 28, and from this position he can angle himself, gaining an extra inch and a half. So putting my Silver Helms a little bit under 30 inches is a safe position. My Anointed is also over 18 inches from the enemy skeleton unit with Banshees, 8 inches from the Banshee Scream, and 10 inches from the skeleton move, because they have the standard of swiftness, making them have a movement of 5. So the general rule is, as always, if you can mitigate to not take any damage by sacrificing a really little bit of position, then you shouldn't take any damage. That's the correct play. Now I'd like to explain to you why these moves are very, very safe and very defensive, and really hard to break at this point in time. My opponent's Crypt Horrors don't have any meaningful options at this stage. They can attempt to charge the Anointed. If they make this charge, I am most likely to pass the break test, and then the Crypt Horrors get charged in the flank by a full force of Silver Helms, and that should close the deal. If the Crypt Horror charge is successful against the Anointed, there is no way to stop the Silver Helms charge, because no Direwolves will be in the range to block this charge from happening, and raising a new unit is not a safe way, is not a reliable way when we are talking about sacrificing 350 points worth of fighting unit. The charge on the Silver Helm bus is actually even worse, because if it is successful, then they get flank charged by the Anointed and by the Frostheart Phoenix. I moved all of the pieces in a way that the Frost Phoenix neatly fits when charging from right to the Crypt Horrors if they would be in combat with the Silver Helms. On the Crypt Horrors rank, in the shooting phase I take care of the Direwolf units, and in magic phase I use the teleport spell to bring 6 Silver Helms on the far right flank a little bit closer to the action. That concludes my turn 1. In my opponent's turn 1, he doesn't make any spectacular move. He approaches a little bit to the front, bringing Terrorgeist a little bit closer to the action and putting his Mortis engine a little bit to the back. Also, my opponent decides to do a little bit of an unorthodox move with the zombies. He makes them into a line, and the line is positioned in a way that it blocks the charge of a Silverhelm bus into Crypt Horrors. If I were to charge the line of zombies with my Silverhelm bus, I wouldn't be able to kill it, because only one guy would make it to the contact with the zombie line. And maybe I wouldn't be screamed at, because screams are magical, and there are plenty of better targets for Vampire Count's Scream than the Banner of the Word Dragon unit, but I would certainly have my 1000 point unit stuck in place, possibly for a very, very long time. So in my turn, I decide to use my Flame Spire anointed special move, which is Drop Flames or Wake of Flames or however it's called. However it's called, it's killing lines of units very, very efficiently. So the rules are that I inflict D3 strength 4 hits per rank. If there is at least one model in a rank, it still counts as the D3 as strength 4 hits. So I inflict about 50 hits on this unit of zombies, annihilating it completely. The remedy to this would be to just put the zombies facing the other direction, so they would have one rank with 20 models instead of 20 ranks with only one model. But if my opponent decided to do this, then he wouldn't be able to move those zombies to block the Silver Helm boss. So I think that my opponent calculated this loss. I assume that the plan of my opponent was to keep the characters with the Silver Helm boss more or less in place. But what I decided to do, I think, was a little bit out of the box. As you can see now on the screen, all of the characters have left the big Silver Helm unit, and instead they joined a small Silver Helm unit. Now, what is the situation at this stage? Right now, this block of Silver Helms in the middle is actually immune to charges. Because if my opponent decides to charge them, I will just flee. There are no characters inside, so I will lose no magic protection. I won't lose the ability to provide reroll with my Battle Standard Bearer. I will just lose very, very little, while I gain the option to charge one of my opponent's key units into the flank. As to other important measurements while executing those moves, I can, and so I do, position myself more than 16 inches from the Mortis engine. I don't have enough movement to bring me meaningfully closer to the Mortis engine, so I decide to sacrifice those few inches to not take Mortis engine's scream into face. And the other very important measurement is the angle of the Silver Helm's block. They are angled in a way that Therageist can't escape their line of sight. Nothing meaningful happens in the magic and in the shooting phase, so that concludes my turn. In his turn, my opponent decides to not declare any charges, instead he moves forward very aggressively. He moves his Crypt Horus right in the front of an empty Silver Helm boss. Therageist positions itself to charge the repeating Bolt Thrower and to scream into Silver Helms, and his big block of skeletons advances forward. Banshees get an extra kick and move out of the unit. Moreover, in his magic phase, my opponent casts big version of Van Hell's Dance Macabre spell. He manages to get an irresistible force and moves all of his units even more forward. However, due to miscast, he loses 2 magic levels, so that does help me a lot. But I think I would prefer to just use the scroll and prevent his units from moving. This way I would be able to grab the Mortis engine. With the move spell, his Mortis engine moved slightly to the back, and here is when first of my opponent's big mistakes comes into play. Mortis engine was positioned only 20 inches away from the anointed on the Flamespire Phoenix. My opponent had an option to move him more to the back, and when the Mortis engine dies, it explodes. Right now it will explode in a range of 15 inches, and that encompasses the Banshees which left the units. Those hits are magical, so even if it would be a charge on double sixes, I would still take it, because the outcome, if I manage to kill the Mortis engine, is absolutely huge. I can possibly kill 3 out of 4 of his screams in one go. Also, a little bit of a general remark now. If you have a rectangular base and you want to be as far from your opponent as possible, and like right now, you don't have to look into a specific direction, because truth be told, Mortis engine won't charge any of the units which he is looking at because they would simply kill him. If you want to gain distance from your opponent and you've already moved your maximum movement allowance, you can pivot your rectangular base to have your side facing the enemy. This way you will get an extra inch. So to sum up, I think this Mortis engine bonus move was badly executed. It should be out of my charge range. In his shooting phase, my opponent screams at 6 silver helms, killing 5 of them. They run away, but very luckily they rally on double one. In my turn, I declare the charge with the Flame Spire Phoenix on the Mortis engine, and I roll enough to get this charge in. And this is when I know that I am going to win this game big time. As always, let me underline again that although I managed to get this charge with some lucky rolls, my opponent had an option to deny me the chance to get those lucky rolls, and he simply didn't do that. And this is how you lose your Warhammer games. If I made a mistake of, let's say, giving my opponent an option to scream at the Frostheart Phoenix with only one Banshee, while moving him not meaningful 1 or 2 inches more, then maybe he would get lucky, then roll double sixes on the scream and I would lose the game. So remember, the dice are not responsible for winning or losing the games. It is how you play Warhammer that decides the outcome. The rest of my moves are as follows. Frostheart Phoenix now can safely advance because I can anticipate only 1, maybe 2 shrieks after this round of close combat. All of my characters leave the unit, and the reasoning for this is as follows. By splitting my characters from the 6 Silver Helms unit, I make the unit of 6 Silver Helms expendable. Before, I kept the characters inside because my opponent could scream at them, so that's why I was protecting them with the Banner of the World Dragon. But now that I've decided to move the Frostheart Phoenix into the range of the shrieks, protecting 6 Silver Helms from shrieks becomes obsolete, because Frostheart Phoenix is a much better target from the shrieks, so I might as well use this unit to make some blocking charge or just move them in some position. So that's the reason of this split. Silver Helms make a reform and move themselves outside Crypt Horror's line of sight. The Crypt Horrors weren't positioned perfectly, so I could do this, but even assuming that the position of Crypt Horrors was so that Silver Helms can't escape the line of sight, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. I would just move myself closer to the house, and by declaring flee from the Crypt Horror's charge, I would be guaranteed to move this unit to safety, because I would flee through the impassable terrain and I would be positioned 1 inch behind it. And the distance between the Crypt Horrors and the Silver Helms would be so great that this charge was guaranteed to fail. In close combat phase, I managed to kill the Mortis engine. It explodes, killing 1 of the Banshees. It also inflicts 2d6 hits on the Terrorgeist, putting 2 or 3 wounds. And together with shooting, I managed to bring Terrorgeist to just 2 wounds left. That concludes my turn. In Vampire Count's phase, the Skeleton block and the Banshee charges the Bolt Thrower. Crypt Horrors advance, and Terrorgeist puts itself in a position that it can scream at the Bolt Thrower. The outcome is that I lose 2 of my Bolt Throwers, Skeleton block reforms, and Banshee overruns, possibly to kill another Bolt Thrower later. Now is the beginning of my 4th turn, and I have an option to charge his main block to the flank with 2 of my Phoenixes, but actually I decide to not execute this maneuver. The reason is that I have more safe options than to go into combat at this stage. I have an advantage in magic, I have an advantage in shooting, and most importantly, I have an advantage in position. So I can very comfortably pick my fights. So instead of charging the main block, I move Frost Phoenix extra close to the skeletons. I position all of my characters outside Terrorgeist's line of sight. While doing so, I carefully measure 18 inches to both the Banshee and the Terrorgeist, because I plan to cast Magic Missile on one of them. Flamespire on Anointed charges the zombies, and the big block of Silver Helms reforms. In Magic phase, I use up my opponent's Dispel Scroll, and that concludes my turn. In Vampire counts, turn 4, Terrorgeist charges the Frostheart Phoenix, big block of skeletons charges the Silver Helms, and they are forced to declare a flee. I do so because I want to pin the skeletons in place. I could possibly hold against the charge of the skeletons because the distance was quite big. It was a charge on a roll of 10 or 11, but once again, I have such a big advantage and it's so early into the game that I think that I can still do a 20-0 without taking any risks. So now it is my turn 5. A little bit of bad luck makes it questionable whether I managed to do 20-0 now or not, because I failed to rally my Silver Helm unit and therefore I can't efficiently control the right side of the board. It creates an opening where my opponent can leave his characters. The Flamespire Phoenix charges the Terrorgeist, but fails to kill it. In Magic phase, I managed to cast Fiery Convocation on the unit of skeletons, killing around half of the unit, and that's the end of my turn. In Vampire counts, turn 5, my opponent moves the skeleton block close to the impassable terrain, and also he moves his Vampire Lord and Battle Standard Bearer out of the unit. The reason for that is because I failed to kill the Terrorgeist and I failed to rally the Silver Helm boss. Now this position for his characters is pretty safe, because Silver Helms won't be able to charge them, and the Phoenixes, even after reform, after they kill the Terrorgeist, they still won't be able to charge the two remaining characters, because they will be simply outside their line of sight. In Magic phase, my opponent decides to not dispel Fiery Convocation, so even more skeletons die, and now is my final turn. So in order to win this game 20-0, I must kill my opponent's characters. I had a plan to be almost 100% certain that I am able to do so, but that plan included a successful rally of Silver Helms. So that failed. However, not all is lost. I still can cast 4d6 Magic Missile on his two remaining characters, possibly killing them. However, due to his careless movements, my opponent granted me yet another chance to get lucky and to have a guarantee that I can kill those characters. Let's take a closer look. I charged the remaining skeletons with a Frostheart Phoenix, with a single Silver Helm, and with an Eagle. And the combat looks as follows. As you can see on the picture, if I manage to overrun now with Frostheart Phoenix, I will hit his unit. Keep in mind that the attacks are resolved in an initiative order. So first the Silver Helm will attack, then the Eagle will attack, and then the Phoenix will attack. And after each initiative step, the unit will possibly shrink. So if I put the wounds in a wrong order, then the Frostheart Phoenix will simply slide to the left and will hit the impassable terrain block instead of his characters. In Magic phase, I get lucky because I managed to roll a 3 as the top power dice, and that means that my Phoenix has +1 initiative, which brings it now to initiative 4, which is the same as an Eagle. In Magic phase, I kill the Battle Standard Bearer from the 4d6 Magic Missile. In combat, the Silver Helm kills 2, so there is no shifting around, and then the Great Eagle along with the Frostheart Phoenix kill the remaining 5 of the skeletons, so once again there is no shifting around. I overrun with the Frostheart Phoenix, go into the Vampire Lord and kill him by turn 6. Now I would like to present to you a slideshow so you can have a feel of how this battle unfolded, and after that I'll do a few closing remarks. I think that the best way to sum up this game would be as follows. I didn't win this game because I was playing risky. I was playing very defensively. And I won it because my opponent allowed me to get lucky. Every game-breaking roll that happened in that game can be 100% nullified by proper movements. The game-breaking moves were the Mortis engine position together with the Banshee and Terrorgeist position, and the wrong angle on the Skeleton Warriors in regards to his Vampire Lord and Battle Standard Bearer. That's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to leave a comment and to rate a video, and if you think that I've earned it, then please consider subscribing. Until next time, cheers!